Welcome to another episode of Take It EV. I'm Greg, and with me I have James from Ionetic. James has been on the podcast before. I believe the episode is number 43. It's going to be linked in the show notes. I just wanted to sync up with James and see what's new and what the business has been like. How is the growth and all that stuff. So James, just take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the podcast. Super excited to tell you what's been going on. There's definitely been lots of updates. The major ones, I suppose, is we've done a big rebrand. So we've got new logo, which looks really smart, new website, and at the same time, we also announced to the world ARC, which is our brand new software accelerated battery pack development system. So that combines software, hardware, and fabrication technologies in order to deliver significant time saving and cost saving in developing custom battery packs for electric vehicles and other electrified systems.
I believe when we spoke before, I think I asked you about what is the target market, whether it's the converters or whether it's like small runs of particular types of vehicles. I'm guessing none of that's changed. You just kind of made it better.
So our target market really is probably best described as niche vehicles. And what we mean by that is vehicles where you need 100 to 10,000 battery packs a year, 100 to 10,000 vehicles a year. And the reason we target that market is because if you want a custom battery pack today, or if you want a battery pack at all, there are really two things you can do. You can either go and contact a traditional engineering tier one and spend tens of millions of pounds developing a battery pack. And you'll get a custom battery pack, but it will take you a long time to get to market. It'll be really expensive. And obviously, there's quite a lot of risk built in there. You're building a new supply chain, new technologies, all those kinds of things. The alternative to that is you just go and get an off-the-shelf battery pack. Right, you just go and get something that's already made, normally from China, that's low development cost or zero development cost. But normally there's a very low performance and they don't tend to meet the requirements. The reality is if you're a really, really big OEM, you're a VW, a Stellantis, Ford, Tesla, you'll just spend tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars on a battery program and have it custom, have it be exactly what you want it to be. And yeah, there's maybe 50 car companies that operate like that in the world. But actually, the overwhelming majority of car companies don't have big budgets to develop cars. They might spend $10 million doing the entire vehicle, for example. And there are thousands of companies like that. In the UK, for example, there are 5 companies that are big, which are JLR, Stellantis, Toyota, Nissan, and I'm missing one. Mini as well. There are 94 small companies who make between sort of 110,000 vehicles a year. And they all can't afford to go and spend $30+ million on a battery program. So they either don't electrify or they buy an off-the-shelf battery pack and hate it. Now, what we wanted to do is offer a solution that wasn't a compromise. It was affordable, actually what you wanted it to be, fast to market, low risk from the start. And that is why we have developed and launched ARC. Because what that allows us to do is build hardware architectures and then use software to automate the design of those architectures. And then when we go into fabrication, we can essentially build very flexible battery fabrication where you can build any of the hardware architectures on the line. So you build a line actually now that instead of the traditional approach of I'm going to spend $200 million building one line that can build one battery pack, we build one line that can build thousands of battery packs or hundreds of thousands of battery packs, which means when we go to this customer base that don't have a big budget, we can now actually deliver a customized battery pack for a NRE or a development cost price point that is actually affordable while still delivering a battery pack that meets the energy requirements, the voltage requirements, and all those different things that you want.
So how many customers do you have so far using the new platform?
Good question. The only customer we can talk about publicly, or the only OEM we work with publicly at the moment, is Alexander Dennis, who make the London bus, and buses for other places as well. But we're currently doing an R&D program with them to develop a next generation battery pack for their vehicles. also working with other people, but we can't disclose those ones publicly yet, but hopefully soon.
Fair enough. But can you announce it once it's out, or is it just like always going to be forever, kind of hush hush and?
No, I think it depends on the customer. I think some of them will be able to announce, and some of them probably will have to stay indefinitely secret. But I mean, these things in automotive, everyone kind of knows what's happening behind the scenes eventually, one way or the other.
I would hope it's a point of pride for somebody to say, like, oh, yeah, we use this very, highly sophisticated and actually Western designed platform rather than just buying off the shelf component in China.
No, yeah, I mean, we very much hope so as well. We very much hope so.
You tell me, but Leah, one of the sales points is, I'm sure, like, we provide a better warranty, right, for this.
Well, I mean, warranty is a big question. I think when you look at sort of mass market passenger car, actually, well, things like battery degradation aren't really at their limit, because you're only ever going to do 500 cycles, maybe 800 cycles in a sort of mass market EV, which is not very many. I mean, that's in the grand scheme of difficulty, that's pretty easy. Actually, where things like warranty are difficult is more in things like commercial vehicles. In a thing like a bus, right, where you're trying to make it last well over a decade. So now we're into and it's running every day. So now we're into thousands of cycles, right? And we're into thousands of cycles while having to manage energy density, while having to package the battery in the vehicle and not ingress in the cabin. So actually the warranty question really is application dependent. It's a very different problem if we're building something for a beach buggy, or whether we're building a bus and everything in between, because the duty cycles are completely different. So really that is something that we do quite bespoke for each customer. That's part of leveraging our core technologies and our tool sets to get to those answers faster, but we're still doing that answer every time for each customer.
So here's a question that I'm sure somebody's going to ask. You mentioned buses, London buses. How many miles do they do a day? Roughly, do you have it? Because I'm sure you've been given a figure.
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share it, but
just roughly, is it under 500 miles?
Oh yeah. You're only doing one charge worth of mileage normally on a day. If that, you're doing probably less than one charge worth of mileage in a day.
Okay.
It's definitely not doing hundreds of miles by any means.
I think I'm asking because I know that it's not like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, but in people's minds, I'm sure you'll hear. And it's always great to actually hear the real figure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's actually probably an oversensitivity to range in EVs. I mean, the reality is I think the statistic in the UK, it's something like 90% of people never drive more than 200 miles. It's some outrageously high statistic.
I think it's like 30 or 25 miles a day on average.
Yeah, is the average, right? So when we think about EV range and everyone's going, oh, I can't buy an EV because it doesn't have enough range or whatever it may be. Well, actually, the reality is most people have a driveway and most people never drive more than 200 miles. So actually, this reality that range is somehow a limiting factor is just incorrect fundamentally. Most people drive 20 miles a day. They're going to go home, plug in the car. It'll very comfortably charge overnight, no bother at all. Next day, it'll be ready to go. So range really isn't the limiting factor. I think it's perceived to be. It shouldn't be anyway.
I mean, this is a completely different conversation, obviously, but I believe, again, you're working in the industry, so it will be great to hear your opinion. But I believe it's a perception. Like we no longer talk to people about facts because facts do not convince people anymore. I remember when I drove the Nissan Leaf with like 107 miles of range on paper. It was never capable of doing that. People were like, "Oh, good luck with that." But that was limiting in people's minds, and now you have 200 and something mile vehicles. Yeah, and people are still resistant. So I think we're past beyond we're beyond the facts will convince people to switch.
No, I think EVs are absolutely a PR problem. I think at this point. I mean, I think also the other thing that I find astonishing is there's all these headlines this year and I'm sure you've read them yourself about how EV sales are stalling. They're slowing the growth. The market shrinking, or whatever it may be. All these things. I mean, I was reading a news headline from Sky News that said electric car sales are stalling. I just don't know if it was a pun or what it was meant to be. But the reality is, if you actually look at the data at a macro level over the last 4 years, since 2020, EVs on the road in the UK have grown 4x. Right, there are 4 times more EVs on the road today than there were in 2020, which is a crazy level of growth. If we look just at the last 12 months, if we look at 2023 versus 2024, when all these headlines have popped up, well, actually, EV sales are up this year. In fact, they've grown 12%. I think it's almost 13% this year. And we've not even finished. And that's Q1 to Q3, year-on-year comparison. And I think what happened is basically car sales as a whole grow over the year. Q4 is always the best quarter. Q1 is always the worst quarter. But EV sales were growing so quickly that every quarter was sequentially better despite that. Now we're getting pretty strong market penetration. Well, they're just starting to follow the normal trend. So actually Q1 was worse than Q4 for the first time. But that is just how car sales work. There's nothing to do with EVs. But everyone hopped on the bandwagon and went, oh, well, EV sales are slowing, they're stopping. The market, it's just not true. It's just not true at all.
I don't know if you've been to Farnborough, the Everything Electric show.
I didn't go to Farnborough. I went to the one in the north last year. So
one of the big things that the people who do Everything Electric or Fully Charged show actually announced with Quentin Wilson and some other people on board is an initiative called EV UK, Electric Vehicles UK, which basically takes people like myself and other creators under a bigger umbrella and kind of, tries to convince the public of, pull the narrative basically back to the facts and reality, except away from the manufacturer, the fabricated reality, which we have been for a while. I could argue since about 2016, but whatever. That's a completely. I don't want to go into politics, but there's been a shift in the world. We all know, like it's not not a secret, but it's amazing to see that there was kind of citing when they were launching it. This was like a launch for press and insiders, and and people have been kind of quoting some of the like more outrageous articles on the in the newspapers or whatever. And there was one newspaper that actually was claiming it in a title that EV sales are tanking or whatever, and they put a screenshot of the actual figures, and it was only showing that the diesel cars were the only ones that actually went down. So their own graphics actually had said something. I might be getting this wrong, but like it was something outrageously bad. Where if you looked up the actual figures, it was like completely the opposite of what they said in the article. So how do you find this from the within the industry? Because there's a rumor that major OEMs are now kind of looking a bit more into softening their targets, and they invest in PHEVs and other such, my opinion, nonsensical technologies that were probably great about 20 years ago when Toyota released the Prius. But we're in 2024. How do you feel it's going?
I mean, I think one thing about Ionetic is it almost intentionally avoids these mass market trends. Yeah, we're not exposed particularly to what VW Group do, for example. And I think if you look at a segment like a bus, well, you can't sell a bus in London now unless it's EV. Like bus sales in London, I don't actually know what the percentage is, but I assume it must be 100% now. Bus sales into London. I know the last time I checked globally, there was a 42% market penetration of electric buses in urban centres. So 42% of all buses sold into urban environments were EV in 2023. So there's no signs of slowing there. In fact, it's arguably the opposite. And I think when we look at lots of other things, I mean, take a forklift. I mean, forklifts are already EV, right? We're just providing better technologies at better pricing. So I think you can look at all the headlines and see, VW said they were going to close 3 factories in Germany or whatever else it may be. But actually, behind the scenes, there's still a lot of positivity about electrification. and it's still happening. It's going forward. We still get very regular customer inquiries across different sectors, different sort of vehicle types. So we see no real signs of slowdown. Global capital markets economy aside, I think it's all going pretty well, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because I read some people told me they're about to close 3 factories, and then I read from their PR releases that they're closing 1 factory. So I don't know who to believe, basically. I don't know where the truth is. The cynical person in me thinks, or like a green tree hugger in me, actually, rather thinks that we shouldn't be changing cars every 3 years like we do now. So maybe actually it's good that, sales slow down. And one of the promises of the EVs is the fact that you're not supposed to, they don't degrade as much as the ICE cars, right? So one of the reasons people would get a new car every 3 years is because they thought it's better and their old one was kind of slowing down or whatever. And I don't think that's the case anymore with EVs. But also in the ICE world, I don't think the technology has changed in the last 10 years. Like they're just repackaging the same thing. They're adding stuff inside the cabin, and the powertrains, largely don't change. This is why they're so cheap to manufacture, right? It's just the same thing.
I mean, I think there is actually an underlying trend that is separate from the EV trend, but is kind of getting like merged in with it, which is this sort of trend of software-defined vehicles, where actually increasingly your car is a software problem more than anything else. And because we're also having electrification happen at the same time, actually, well, a lot of the EVs are getting a lot of the software kind of upgrades at the same time. What this means is actually your vehicle's performance, features, and functionality are subject to software updates now. Whereas that wasn't really a thing ever in ICE vehicles. I mean, some ICE vehicles have it now, the newer ones. But actually, I do generally agree that the reasons people replace cars, because technology is advancing so fast, are going to become less and less true as we have these sort of opportunities to upgrade vehicles. And maybe that's how we'll see the sort of after-sales strategy evolve for some of these OEMs, right? Where they're actually now losing out because EVs don't really break down in the same way. Maybe we'll see just value-added services post-vehicle purchase. Maybe that's actually how we'll see that evolve over time. But I mean, yeah, from a consumerist perspective, right? Like buying less things helps the environment. But I think fundamentally, there is quite a lot of data that shows EVs are significant net positives to the world. Like it actually is better to buy an EV, especially in a place like the UK where our grid is relatively low carbon intensity. When you look in places like France or the Nordics, I mean, the grid intensity for carbon is so low that your ROI on getting an EV is in the months. So I certainly think it is still worth a swap for the mass market, especially for things like buses or last mile delivery vehicles, where what you're doing is you're removing carbon from urban centers, and that has huge health benefits. Huge. Millions of lives are probably affected by centralized urban carbon and all the various other particulates that end up in the air. So it's not just about global system level, are we using less electricity, etc., etc. It's also about health benefits real world in urban centers, where actually obviously most of the population lives.
Yeah, I think somebody did in 2018 like a not a study, but like analysis of probably one of the most dirty grids in the EU, which is Poland, or was Poland at the time, and they kind of the bottom line was that even if it's a coal powered electricity, it's still actually technically greener, like CO2 emissions per mile or per kilometer.
Yeah, so I actually worked this out because I did this in a presentation. It was I think it was last year, and I was trying to make this point that there is a grid dependency on driving EVs, but actually in Poland you were borderline on parity So if you buy a Golf ID or a Golf 8, like the brand new Golf, or an ID3 or a Tesla Model 3, you were kind of broadly the same, except obviously you're moving the carbon to a power station instead of having it in a central location. However, I actually then presented that. I did that presentation, I think it was either 6 months or 12 months later, and Poland had decarbonized so quickly their grid that they were no longer the worst grid in Europe. It changed countries. So actually everybody that had bought an EV, even at that point where it was even, was now actually contributing. Because it's one thing that we don't really think about is as you decarbonize the grid, you also decarbonize transport if it's electric. Currently they're disconnected, right? You decarbonize the grid, it doesn't make a difference to the transport. But if you make all the transport EV, then you get the double benefit. Every gram saved on the grid also is a gram saved in transportation. So I don't really think it's a valid argument to say, well, the grid is, X grams of CO2 per kilowatt hours. Well, everyone's decarbonizing at a rapid rate. So even if you buy an EV today, and even if it has, X saving, well, that saving's only going to improve in the next 12 months, 24 months, 5 years. So I think actually accelerating EV adoption is still really important. And that's part of what we're obviously trying to achieve, right? Let's lower the development costs, lower the risk of doing this so we can get actually more electric vehicles on the road.
So if anybody's interested in, because we're coming up on time, if anybody's interested in looking up, your stuff, can actually like Joe Public look at any of the things you're doing, or is it a bit more B2B and kind of, do you have any public facing PR stuff?
Yeah. We've got quite a few press releases and articles about what we're doing. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Check out our website. And obviously, if you want a battery pack and you don't want it to be a compromise solution, then feel free to absolutely get in touch and drop me a message.
Okay. And obviously, it's targeted. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if VW called you, but they've got their own platform.
Well, I think, look, I don't think our solution is actually very smart if you're VW Group, because what you need to optimize for if you're VW Group is solely the unit cost. It's the only thing that matters. Whereas what we're optimizing for is the total program cost, right? We're optimizing for the development and the unit cost at the same time. So, I think, would we want to do like an ID3 battery pack? Probably not. But, when we look at the smaller vehicles, the smaller run vehicles, Audi R8, Lamborghini, Bentley, stuff like that, that's where we can play.
If you can produce or design and kind of help manufacturing a very good battery pack for a bus, that's, it's going to be okay in a sports car. Right? That's a different problem.
Slightly different optimizations, but the architecture's there for it. That's what we want to build.
Bonus question, if I may. Yeah, because you're a business, and do you envision yourself kind of working as an independent business for a very long time, or how do you kind of position yourself for the future? Like, will you be acquired by other bigger brand in the future, do you think, or you're striving to be a solo business just doing what you're doing?
Oh, I don't know about acquisitions quite yet. I think what I would say about that in terms of like independence is what we're doing is generally quite a difficult thing, and I think it's important to have the right partners in order to build that. So we already have a public partnership with Rockwell Automation, for example, who are a big manufacturing technology company. So I think having the right partners, the right suppliers, the right people to work with is really important to build success here. I think doing it on your own is I was gonna say impossible, and I think that probably is the right word.
Well, I should have asked you that question probably 20 minutes ago, but I thought I'll just leave it as a bonus question. Anyway, thank you, James, for Ionetic.
Yeah, appreciate it.